Welcome to the Fit Femme Project Alignment Podcast. It is here that we cultivate and gather all who have been through it in fitness, relationships, careers, lifestyle changes, and unforgettable crucial life pivots trying to achieve their most sovereign selves. We're here to provide you with thought-provoking, detailed stories and information from truly fascinating men and women from all walks of life, professions, generations, and modern-day sagas who speak to their rawest, darkest moments that made them the strong, decisive, humble, helpful, healing people that they are today. We ask them to hold nothing back because life is a multi-dimensional pursuit to be stronger, healthier, and more aligned mentally, emotionally, and physically. Let's go. Hey FFP fam, welcome back to the FFP Alignment Podcast, your favorite podcast, just in case if you didn't know. I have another great episode lined up for you guys. I interviewed Carly Pepin. She is an international speaker and consultant with a specialized focus on human behavior. With a global reach, she delivers the message that regardless of one's background, occupation, or origin, every individual encounters personal and professional challenges stemming from their own perceived flaws. Carly emphasizes that the key to living a fulfilling life lies in how you utilize and transform these stories. Having devoted her life to mastering the intricacies of human behavior, Carly empowers others to do the same. Through her expertise, she guides individuals in looking beyond the surface and delving into the core essence of their being. By uncovering and addressing the deeper issues that hinder personal growth, Carly enables her clients to design their lives with purpose rather than succumbing to a life dictated by duty. Again, this was an incredible conversation. We will definitely have to have her back on to talk about everything else that she does, but enjoy. Hey everybody, thank you for joining me. It's the FFP Alignment Podcast. Today we have our special guest on with me, Carly Pepin. Did I say that right, your last name?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. I'm actually so excited for this topic today because it is yet to be something that we haven't talked about on our podcast, which is body dysmorphia, what it is, what it isn't, and everything in between. But before we get there, I'd like to tell our listeners more about your backstory, what led you to where you are today, and your work, all that jazz.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
diving into this one. Yes. And so I'm a human behavior specialist, and I began, as often many people do, we have our own struggles, our own challenges, and trying to figure out how to overcome them. So there was a lot of the traditional modalities that I was trying, and it just wasn't working for me, particularly, actually, interesting enough, with eating disorders and anxiety and depression. So all the traditional stuff just wasn't working. And it wasn't until I left where I was living in LA, decided to move to Australia because somehow I assumed that was all my problems, which it didn't. But it did assist me.
Wow.
I know. Yeah, the problems came with me, which was a beautiful insight onto realizing like things come from within, right? And I managed to find my first coach and human behavior specialist. And as they say, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So it was a really great
Wow.
eye-opening situation where I started to understand priorities, life purpose, how that links to the challenges that are occurring, how our behavior kind of goes with all of that. And within the first few months, I was already shifting my anxiety, and I was also shifting my eating disorder, which was huge. That was massive for me. So it was a really inspiring time. And just because of the results that I got, I really wanted to continue studying, to do educating myself, growing, and then also share this information with others.
So, what is how would you define a human behavior specialist? Because it's not a therapist, it's not a counselor, right?
Yes. Yeah. So when we think about human behavior, it's understanding basically why we're doing what we're doing. We judge ourselves on a daily basis, and we should ourselves of what we should be doing, what we should not be doing. We say that we're bad. We say that we're wrong. We put all these labels on ourselves, not understanding that there's a method, a purpose behind what we're doing. So when we think about human behavior, it's not just understanding that we have behaviors and characteristics and trying to get rid of them. It's actually understanding the why behind it, because everything that you have within you is a tool. And the amazing thing is that as soon as you stop trying to change yourself and love and appreciate and understand like why you have these components, your life transforms, right? It's kind of a catch-22. Love it and it transforms, right? But even
Yeah.
by that time, you're like, I don't need it to transform. I love my life now. So it really
Oh,
is a
that's such a beautiful
catch-22.
way to put it. Yeah,
Yeah.
such a great way to put it. I've known throughout my journey that the minute I always like to as like an example, I don't know where I heard this, some teaching or something, but kind of along the lines of what you're talking about. Like if you like clench sand in your fist, like all the sand goes out, but if you cup it real lightly, it like you get more sand in your hand. So kind of along the same lines, like the less like control that you try to have over your life, the easier things are.
It is true. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So on to our topic, how did you with body dysmorphia, is that a large part of your work or is it just kind of a sliver of it?
It's a sliver of it. And so I
Okay.
work with a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, individuals wanting to, sometimes people transitioning into that, individuals who want to embrace their kind of leadership, those components. But body dysmorphia impacts everyone. Everyone. It doesn't matter who you are, like, we all have it, men, women, kids, adults, like, no matter what age, and so it comes up quite frequently in many of my sessions, right? So it is definitely a component and a big component, and I don't know, it depends on, like, the level of body dysmorphia you have and how it impacts you, but it's something that's important to me, is I do remember there was a time I actually remember I was going on a date. This is how bad my body dysmorphia was. I was going on a date. I was sitting in the room and I had gotten dressed and I thought I was fat. And I'm not fat, by the way. I'm not. I just thought
No.
I was. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking in the mirror and I started having a panic attack. And I called my friend and she actually had to calm me down because I almost canceled the date and I didn't even want to leave the house. So my perceptions and my body dysmorphia and how I saw myself, even though it wasn't true or factual, was so off that there were times that I actually didn't leave the house because I was too fat in my perception and I would stay in for that weekend and I would just try to avoid people. That's how intense it was. So when I work with, that's why I'm like,
Wow.
I love to incorporate this stuff because it's had a major
Yeah.
impact on me. So even if someone has a small component where they've got to go on stage and they're feeling uncomfortable with how they look, maybe they had to work more and their body has changed. I was just working with someone on aging, just a woman who's getting out there and she's starting her business and launching her speaking career. And she's just having a hard time with the aging process, and judging
Hmm.
herself and how she looks. So it definitely impacts all of us. All of us. So no
Oh,
matter
that
who I
just
work with, yeah, I get to do it.
yeah, that definitely makes my heart like I just want to hug everybody. Like I get it. That's a good way that you put it that everyone kind of struggles with that. Like look at this thing, and it's like you're dumb. That's not true. So how would you define like I guess maybe more in a clinical way, how would you define body dysmorphia? Like what it is, what it isn't, and all that.
Yeah, so body dysmorphia is when we have a misconstrued version and perception of ourselves. And so, what we actually think we are and what we see is not what's actually truth, right? So, you might sit there and look in the mirror and just say, I'm ugly, right? I'm fat, I'm this, or I'm that. And it's like, well, according to who? According to you in this moment and your perceptions. The reality is you can't have that dysmorphic view of yourself, which is a one-sided perception. You're not seeing all of who you are unless you actually have compared yourself to one or many individuals on the outside. I mean, we could use social media as an example. Instagram's a great example. Maybe you're scrolling through and you see a woman and she's got curves and you're like, whoa, that woman has amazing curves. And then you look at yourself in the mirror and you think that's missing. And now you've labeled yourself as ugly or incomplete as a result.
Mm.
And the truth is that you're not. And whatever you see on the outside, you actually have on the inside. But because you haven't identified it, you now have a dysmorphic view of yourself.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. So, is there a difference between like just being insecure about something about the way you are versus it being a true dysmorphic look at what you see in the mirror. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So your insecurity is the dysmorphia. Yeah. And you wouldn't
Okay.
have that insecurity unless you had a dysmorphic, which is a judgment on yourself and a one sided perception of who you are and how you look. Right. And it's interesting too, because we don't have insecurity unless we're comparing ourselves to what we think we're meant to look like. Again, that's where the dysmorphic view comes in. We think we're supposed to look like this and we should look like this. And then we look in the mirror and we're like, but that's not what I look like. So now I'm insecure with my body, my figure, my face, my looks, all those different components, whatever it is you're judging inside yourself. So, yeah, any insecurity that you have. And again, you don't have that unless you've compared yourself to someone on the outside. Because if no one ever told you that a certain way of looking was right or wrong, or you never made the judgment or assumption based off something you had seen that something and a way of looking was right or wrong, you'd never have any reason to look in the mirror and put yourself down. Not one time.
That,
So it's all
yeah.
rooted from comparisons. Yeah. And it's
Yeah,
perceptual
that's
too,
good.
by the way. It's like not even like a
Hmm.
real solid comparison. It's all perception.
Yeah, that's so true because
Hmm.
I would label myself as a pretty confident person.
Yeah.
I the majority of my days I don't feel insecure about my body, but that doesn't mean it never happens.
Yeah.
And I was gonna bring up like social media and stuff later on, but I don't care. We can talk about it now because I feel like if it didn't exist, we'd be feel so much better about ourselves if social media wasn't around because I'll post my updates through my I'm doing like a little bit of a weight loss phase or whatnot, and just because I want to, right? But I'll get all these comments of like, no, you're beautiful the way you are. It's like I know, but like do you see
Yeah.
what I mean?
I do.
It's
Yeah.
so sometimes it's like so backwards and it's like I know I am, thank you, I appreciate it, but
Yes.
I'm not struggling here.
You're like, I'm okay. I got this. So yeah,
Yeah.
social media, all of the dynamics of our comparisons and the challenges were actually there before. We haven't noticed it as much, and social media has made it more obvious. That's one of the benefits to the social media component. It's that makes us more aware of our comparisons, whereas before maybe it flew under the
Oh.
radar a little bit. But like a great example, because I grew up in Los Angeles area, right? And people say that people in LA are shallow, but they're not really. It's just everything that happens, we're just outside all the time. When I tell you that the weather in Southern California is great, I mean, it's great, right? It's like 60 degrees and we're in like full winter gear and we're like, why is it so cold? We can't go outside right now, you know? So it's just an outdoor culture. And as a result, people are fitter and healthier because we're just going outside and exercising all the time. And it's funny because when I went to Canada, I was surprised because it was definitely a different dynamic. There are people who go outside and you are outdoors more, but even I put on some weight and I was like, well, it's a lot colder. So my body actually wants the extra weight because it keeps me warmer. I was like, that's one thing. And the second thing was I wasn't going out as much. I wasn't exercising as much. So it's a really interesting dynamic, like when we look at cultural dynamics as well. And funny enough, I married to an Indian, right? So in Indian
Mm.
culture, even at my perceived heaviest, right? Like whatever my weight fluctuations are, when I'm at my heaviest, I'm still too thin for that culture. Like they look at me and they're like, you got to put on some weight. And I'm like, in LA, I'm huge. And I'm like, with you guys, I'm thin, you know? So it's hysterical. But as long as you love yourself, it doesn't even matter. But that's the point,
Yeah.
right? It's like, it doesn't matter where you go and it doesn't matter who you're embracing and whether you're on social media or off social media, depending on the culture, depending on the person, depending on everyone else's background, is where you're going to get feedback of whether you're beautiful or you're heavy or you're thin or you're ugly. And it's all in someone else's perceptions. It's only when we agree with them. When we agree with them because we have a similar dysmorphic view of ourself that we feel impacted. And so it's a great feedback because if someone looks at me and says like, hey, Carly, you're a little fat right now, I'll be like, oh yeah, I did actually put on some weight. And I can say it doesn't bother me, you know, and that's okay. Right. To me, that was just feedback. But and it's happened before. If someone said, Carly, you're a little fat right now. And I used to burst into tears, right? Because I would judge myself because
Oh.
I'm like, that's bad or wrong, because that's the dysmorphic view. So think of it as well, whenever we get either criticism or praise on something, is like that's part of our dysmorphic view of ourselves. If we're getting criticized and we're agreeing, that's because you can't see the beauty within having imperfections, because you're not going to be perfect for anyone, like I said, but also B, just realizing that you still have both sides. The person that I'm heavy with, there's another person that I'm thin with. The person that I'm thin with, there's another person that thinks I'm heavy. It just depends on who you're spending time with. But loving and appreciating both sides and knowing both sides are perfect keeps you balanced on the inside. So you're not in that constant judgment cycle and the internal like guilt and shame and yo-yo dieting and all the crazy stuff that comes when we have body dysmorphia.
Yeah, that really explains my dating history. Like, we won't get into that, but
It's awesome.
so are there different types of like? Because when I think of, or I guess I could assume the majority of the population, when they hear the word body dysmorphia, it's like when I look in the mirror and I literally, it's like I'm hallucinating about something. Like I'm literally seeing, 80 extra pounds on my body or this giant nose or something. Is that part of it? So what are there like different levels?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. And it's not really so much levels, but it's just different based on each person. For example, it was really interesting. Like I was actually just talking to someone. We were just working on their body dysmorphia. Funny enough, right before this podcast. It's perfect timing.
Oh, yeah.
And and interestingly enough, like they were perceiving and admiring someone on the outside for their ears. And I asked him, I was like, what is it about their ears that you're admiring? Is it genuinely their ears or is it something that it gives them? And she goes, it just gives them a really unique look. And she goes, and I just think I'm really basic. Right. So in that moment, she's judging herself, perceiving and putting herself down. And she looks in the mirror and thinks, I'm boring and basic. And this person is unique and exciting. When the truth is she has that unique and exciting feature or features in a different form. She just hasn't acknowledged it yet. She hasn't owned it yet inside of her. And when you ask those questions, it's like this woman, it's like we were asking, well, where do you have the unique features? Where is it on you? Where have people from the outside actually acknowledged those unique features? All of a sudden, she realized, oh my gosh, there's nothing missing inside me. I don't have the body dysmorphia anymore, and I can look in the mirror. And she doesn't get proud of herself for being unique, but she's also not putting herself down for being basic. All of a sudden, she's just neutral with herself. She's just a normal person that has some unique features and some basic features, and that's okay. And it's interesting too, because I remember the first time I worked on looking in the mirror, and when I looked in the mirror, I was like, you're ugly. And I was like, I would just look in the mirror and it would take me all day. And by the end of the day, and I would walk by mirrors and windows all day long and I'd look and stuff. And at the end of the day, I'd be like, you're not ugly. And it would take me all day of repetition to convince myself that I wasn't. And after I worked on it, it was crazy because I woke up the next day and when I cleared that dysmorphic perception, I woke up the next day and I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, you're Carly. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I haven't seen you forever. I've just been looking at ugly, pretty, ugly, pretty. And then I got to look in the mirror and I was like, what do you see today? It's like, I just see Carly. So when I say it just dissipates, it's like we're not seeking the pride of beauty or good looks. We're not stuck in the shame of ugly or bad looks and whatever it is our perception. But you can just look at yourself in the mirror and see you and be grateful for you the way you are. It's really inspiring.
That's
Yeah.
so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's so true. So what was that process like for you? Because you
Mm.
obviously, did you coach yourself? I guess I could say it like that. Coach yourself through that? Or did you get outside sources to help you through that? What did it look like for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is where the human behavior stuff comes in is I've just been studying like crazy. So when it finally like figured out how to figure that out within myself, right? First, it's identifying on the outside who we're comparing ourselves to, what we're comparing ourselves to, and then going in and owning it within ourselves, right? We own those components within ourselves. So we have certainty that nothing's missing. But then also making sure that I'm clearing any guilt or shame on any components that I'm feeling judgy about for myself, like if I'm not perfect in my perception and whatever I look like. So I'm also clearing those. So I'm clearing guilt and shame on some components. And then anything that comes up with pride around my looks, I'm clearing that. I mean, it's not an overnight process for sure, but it's totally
Yeah.
worth it. And funny enough, like it still comes up. So this month I'm actually going to do a little bit more, right? Because even though I've done a lot of work, there were some other components that came up and I'm like, yeah, I have not cleared that yet. I clearly have not worked on this to the same degree as some of the other items. And plus I am aging. So my body's changing and shifting and adjusting. And there are things right now that I haven't been happy with, right? And so it's like that's a normal process of our body dysmorphia as well, is that it's not just one and done. You don't just clear it and get over it. You might clear all the different components that you have now, but then in 10 years you're going to look in the mirror and you're like, my boobs are sagging. Like, what happened? They used to be way up here. And then you judge yourself and it's like, all right, let's go love and appreciate that part. And so remembering too, like it's definitely a journey. And so while I've done a lot of work, a ton, which I'm very grateful that I've had the opportunity to do that so I could leave the house now without breaking down and crying. And I don't even have to think about it anymore. But
Oh.
also, yeah, as I grow and as I evolve, just keeping track and paying attention to when those judgments come in so I could find it within myself to balance my perceptions, to come back to gratitude, to come back to unconditional love for myself. Yeah, it takes time, but there's a process, and when you go through it, it's worth it, man. I know people out there who have it and are like, I relate to you, Carly. It's worth the effort. It's just worth it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've talked about this before when it comes to changing a lifestyle, a behavior, or anything that you drastically need to change about your life. You have to then put in like a new filtration system, and it's pretty severe and it's exhausting. And just like you said, you have to work and change those perceptions. So it's probably for you when you first started out, or anyone who's trying to, that it's probably every 5 minutes. You have to kind of, it's almost like retraining your brain, right?
Yes. Yes. And you're retraining your brain in the moments that you do, because the questions that I ask, with clients or at the workshops and stuff, basically what it's meant to do, we're meant to rewire your neural pathways. Right now, your neural pathways are convinced, and the perception is convinced that life is a certain way. When I shift your perception, and it's not through, I'm not talking about through affirmations or anything, but getting data, quality evidence from your life, things that actually exist to show you that your perceptions have some falsehood to them. And when you shift them to see what's real, your neural pathways shift in your brain as well. And that changes your decisions and actions. So, yeah, for example, I mean, mine's a great case because it was so extreme, right? So, the extremeness of my perceptions are you shouldn't even be seen in public was my old perception if you're not like in this perfect condition, which is wild. And now it's like that perception is completely gone and it's been transformed. So that neural pathway is gone. And now I don't even think about it. Like it's not even a thought. It's not even like it's just out of my head. It's the past. It's transformed. It's gone. There's no more brain noise around that. So when we think about those dynamics, it's like, yeah, you're actually shifting your neural pathways, which is changing how you act, behave, think, speak on a conscious and unconscious level, which is quite powerful. When we say, you're right, you can't control the outside world, you're not going to be able to do it. You can't control like how things are turning out, right? But what you can control are your perceptions, decisions, and actions. Those are the only three things you control. And what a powerful opportunity to be able to do that.
Absolutely. So how would you coach, or how do you coach people around this, like basically to help anybody who's like listening, to help themselves basically?
Yeah. So basically, when we look at this, and this is amazing because every individual I've worked with, we'll talk about body dysmorphia. And it's just funny because, on the outside, I get to listen to someone talk to me about how they perceive themselves. And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, this is going to be easy. I'm like, these people are really attractive, really good looking. Like, everyone is beautiful. Like, everyone has like
Yeah.
all these forms of beauty within them. So when they tell me what they're admiring, I'm like, we got this. We got this. But basically, it's like, what are you judging inside yourself? And what do you think you should be? And who are you comparing yourself to, right? It's like kind of like that, according to who. And you might come up with an idea, a perception. I had to do a lot of work on this on supermodels because when I was growing up, I didn't have Instagram, but I loved Vogue magazine and I loved looking at runways. I'm super into fashion. It's unavoidable for me. So I have a lot of data from different supermodels, and there was different components where it's like, well, who am I comparing myself to? Giselle, the supermodel Giselle. I compared myself a lot to her. So I did the work on her. I had another client where it's like, well, who are you comparing yourself to? And she was comparing herself to Beyonce, right? So Beyonce and Beyonce's figure and Beyonce's beauty and Beyonce's hair, right? So that was a big one for her. I had another client, well, the one who I was just speaking to, it was just a friend, right? It was actually a friend. I've had people who are like, well, I'm actually comparing myself to my mom, my sister, right? It could be a brother. It could be another family member. Whoever you perceive has the form of beauty that you don't have. That's the first step. You want to identify that person or people. In my case, because the body dysmorphia was very strong, I had for different parts of the body and different looks and stuff, had different people, right? I had so much data from different people and I had so many comparisons. So if there's many, that's also okay. Don't stress. That's also completely normal. And then you want to specifically identify what you are admiring in that person that you think you don't have, right? So that example I just gave was the woman who was admiring the ears that gave that individual a unique look. And what we're going
Which
to
is such
do,
a specific thing, by the way. Sorry.
so specific.
Ears.
No, it's
Yeah.
perfect. By the way, we are
Yeah.
that specific. And the more specific you
Yeah.
get with it, the easier it is for you to work on. But we are that
Okay.
specific as individuals, right? And like find the person you admire and just tear them down in your head. In a sense, where get so detailed, like get that detailed on like it's the ears. And what is it about the ears? It makes them really unique, right? And I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, even just like hair. Like I had someone with hair and it was like, what is it about the hair? I love that beach wave look that they have. Like it's amazing, right? And you just get into all these little tiny, tiny details and specifics because that's how specific we are. And that's why we look at ourselves in the mirror and say, we're ugly. Well, why are you ugly? Ask those detailed quality questions. And then once you get that answer, find it in your own form. So the example with the ears is a great example because she was looking and admiring the unique look. So it was like, okay, well, where is your unique look? Where do you have a unique look and a unique flair that people recognize, right? And then we started to go through all the data from her own life. No speculation, but actual data from where people have acknowledged her for that unique look. And she found so many reasons that now she knows. I was like, does this person have it more than you? And she's like, no. You guys are equal? Yeah. Anything missing? No. Cool. Now, all of a sudden, if she looks in the mirror, she's not looking for a unique look. She already has certainty she has it. So it's important too to get the data from your life. And then the other dynamic too to clear body dysmorphia is loving and appreciating yourself for where you're at now. So for example, if you are perceiving you're overweight, right? And you're perceiving maybe you don't like your hair, you don't like your skin, you don't like your body, you don't like that you're not like fit enough. I know a lot of men when I work with them, there's a lot around their stomach that they have a lot of dysmorphia around their stomach and not having abs, right? So that's a big component for them. And we actually ask how that serves us because we are purposeful human beings. You have the body that you have because it actually fulfills and supports your purpose and your priorities to a greater degree than not having this body. And a really great example is like I was working with an individual who was working in corporate and they had a really hard time like basically navigating a man's world. But it was easier for them to navigate the man's world when men weren't infatuated with her beauty. So she gained weight for business, right? So that was her
Wow.
perceptions. Yeah, and her charges. But she did that because that was her perceptions and her charges. I had another gentleman, an individual, and his perception was that if he got a partner and he was really fit and trim, right? Fit and trim, that if he got a partner like that, he would never know if they really loved and appreciated him. And that was based on a past wound that he had with a partner when he was fit and trim, that when they were together, he later broke up realizing that they were only together for looks and he really, really, really loved her. So that was really hard on him. So he got rid of the fit and trim, let that body go. And now all the partners he has certainty, when he's with them for long periods of time that they love them for who he is instead of beyond the body. So remember too, if you don't have the body that you think you're supposed to have or should have or beating yourself up for, is to ask those questions of how it's actually serving your life, how it actually benefits you, and come to gratitude and appreciation. And after that, then I check in again. Because this is why. After I do that, you might actually not want to change. You might genuinely
Mm.
love and appreciate your life and be like, and I can say, so do you want to still work on it and change this form? Because you can change the form of how you're getting these benefits, right? You can change it with the other individuals that I was speaking of, the male. It's like we actually went back and we cleared the emotional charge he had around the relationship so he could give himself permission to be fit again and realize like that he's still safe and in love, right? He wanted to do more work because he wanted to be fit even after loving and appreciating himself. But the one who I worked with as well, who she was trying to lose weight, when we got the benefits to her and she got to see how it served her, I said, do you want to keep going and keep working on this and change the form and transform your body still? And she goes, actually, no. She's like, actually, no. She's like, I actually really love myself. And she's like, I'm actually more comfortable this way. This is easier for me. And she's like, I'm not upset about this. She said, I've just been judging myself. And I was like, great. If you change your mind, go for it. So it's funny, after you do this work and actually clear your body dysmorphia and your perceptions, you may want to stay the way you are because it's perfect for you. It's really quite beautiful. And sometimes you want to transform it. And if you do, and just do the deeper work around the actual reasons and the triggers and the charges that are causing you to stay there, basically the strategy.
Wow, that is really beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you work or have you worked with like bodybuilders before?
I actually haven't worked with a bodybuilder yet. I work with like fit people and health people, but no
Yeah.
official bodybuilders yet. Yeah.
I was just curious because
Uh,
well, my friend Casey, who is the owner of the FFP, she is a bodybuilder. She competes in body bikini competitions. You know, it's all about your looks, right? And
yeah.
you're judged on that. Like, it's probably the worst scenario. But it's, you know, it really truly is a sport because it takes a lot of work to get to this physique and it's really
Yes.
commendable. But she really opened up my eyes into like the behind the scenes and how much people struggle. Like, you would look at
Yeah.
this person, you would look at her or anyone in that industry and just be like, perfect body, but yet they're like, this delt could be, she said that to me, it just needs to be
Yes.
like that. I'm like, you
Amazing.
it
Yeah.
it's wild, which I get it because it's a double-edged sword. They're being judged on that delt being this perfect size, but it's also like you're driving yourself insane.
Yeah, and so this is the interesting dynamic because people assume if someone has like a model, you know, the bodybuilder, individuals who have that level of fitness, they make the assumption that they don't have body dysmorphia, but they absolutely do. Like I said, it hits everyone. And she's probably comparing herself to other bodybuilders, not seeing where she has whatever that delt means. And maybe it sounds like it might be like the perfection of like how the body is, right? If she's not seeing it in her own form, she keeps putting herself down for not having it in her delt where she's got it somewhere else. And models go through this as well. So I've had the opportunity to work with like models as well in that component.
Yeah.
And they definitely go through it. So there's an assumption that they have it together and that's why they look that way. But that's not actually the case. They're comparing themselves to all these other models, all these other women who they label as beautiful, and they too have body dysmorphia, right? It's a big deal. So when we say it hits everyone, it hits everyone. And no matter what you perceive you look like, it hits everyone. And sometimes people listen and they're like, well, you know, Carly, like you're saying this, but I really am considered like an ugly person, right? Not true. According to who? Yeah. No, seriously. Like I have people say
Yeah.
that to me and I'm like, according to who? You know, what level of society have you connected with that you've put yourself down? And the person who you've compared yourself with, the person who thinks you're beautiful, thinks that person is ugly and looks ridiculous. But you haven't, you're disowning that part of yourself. You're disowning that life is demonstrating to you. Everyone has a different taste. Everyone has a different way of seeing a person. And to one person, I may be beautiful, but to another one, I'm basic and ugly and boring. Right. And that's my reality and that's my truth. That's everyone's truth. And it depends on where I am, who I'm talking to, their background, the culture, everything. And so if we're just trying to be one side, I can't be beautiful for everyone. I really can't. I can only be grateful for who I am according to me. That's the only thing. The only person you're meant to please, in a sense, is you. And it's not even pleasing you, it's just being grateful for who you are, grateful for how you look, grateful for the body you have, right? Because it's beautiful and perfect for you on your journey. And there's 8 billion people on this planet with a different opinion. You will not be
Yeah.
beautiful for everyone. You will not be ugly for everyone. You are going to be equally beautiful and ugly in the world. And when you see that, you just get to be grateful for what you have.
Yeah, that's such a
Yeah.
great perspective. There's billions of people on this earth. Like, so let's be realistic.
Really
But, that
realistic.
reminds me, yeah, when I was growing up, I have three older brothers, and I don't know how I came to this realization, but they were a lot like better at than things than I was. They were more athletic. They just got easy A's, and I just always was struggling. And in order to make myself feel better about myself, I would just be like, Katelynn, there's probably a lot of people that are dumber than you. There's probably a lot of people that are smarter than you. Okay, that's all right. I can live right
It's
there.
facts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone who listens, I get messages all the time, by the way, because I'm on a lot of podcasts, and people send me messages about how stupid I am and how like I don't know anything. And at the same time, I'm like getting messages about how amazing I am, and just listening to this podcast changed my life. And it's like, I can't, if I get offended by one, right, or too proud by the other, I'm just seeking one side or the other. But the truth is I genuinely am stupid to some people, and I'm genuinely highly intelligent to others. And that's okay. That both serve me. Both serve me. Both are beneficial for me, right? And it's seeing that we have that with our body as well. What you gave example of is mental dysmorphia, right? A
Mm.
disowned part within yourself of your own intelligence and your own form. Because and I see that a lot, even with like schoolwork and education and stuff, is
Oh
that,
man,
we
yeah.
practice,
I
yeah,
wish I had you when I was 12. Well,
yeah.
sorry, keep going.
No, it's fine. When I was in high school, I almost didn't graduate, right? I almost didn't graduate. And I remember when I walked down to get my diploma, or I was getting to school, I was late because I had body dysmorphia, by the way. And I was like all freaked out about what I was wearing. So I was so late. And I'm rushing in to get my seat. And my economics teacher gives me 2 thumbs up and goes, D is for diploma. And I just remember thinking, man, but he's right. I barely graduated. What he didn't know, and this is hysterical, by the way, he didn't know that I was ditching school and I was going to about 1 to 2 hours of school a day my senior year. And I would go ditch school to go manage a surf shop. And at that surf shop, they were teaching me how to run a business. They were teaching me accounting. They were teaching me how to hire employees, fire employees, stock inventory. They were teaching me the ins and out of a business. So here's someone telling me I'm stupid, right? And I'm perceiving I'm stupid because I'm not getting good grades. Where genuinely, I actually wanted to learn about business. And so when we talk about dysmorphia, and you're talking about the educational component, even though your brothers were getting straight A's and you weren't, you have somewhere where you were focused and educated and actually really, really intelligent, more intelligent than your brothers. And it's only based on our personal priorities and our values. And so even like the fitness, the woman that you work with, the bodybuilder, even her priorities and her values and her purpose revolves as well around having that physique. Mine does not. Does that make me lesser than her? No. I'm putting time and energy, the same time and energy she puts into that, I put into the human behavior stuff because I love that. But I would never expect her to walk away from taking care of her physique to do what I do. That would ruin her life
Right.
and what's meaningful for her. But I can't expect to look like that. And someone like her can't expect to have whatever she's not focused on and I am. She can't expect to have the same thing as me. But when we judge ourselves and we look on the outside and we say, I should be that, I'm supposed to be that, not realizing every single person on this planet is mastering mastering components of their lives based off their priorities and what their life purpose is, you're becoming masterful and you don't even know it. You spend so much time and energy on certain things. It's crazy. Like, it's crazy. And you're doing the same thing as she's doing, as she's perfecting her physique. You're doing it in your own form. And so when we actually get to
Yeah.
see that, that's again when the dysmorphia goes away, because you stop trying to be something on the outside and you love and appreciate who you are for who you are instead. And you connect with that. And the cool thing is like the second you connect with that and have more of that certainty, you get to go take that and apply it to your life to a greater degree, which is amazing. Because the more that you know yourself and connect with yourself, the more you get to like embrace that part of you and live it, which is so fulfilling. It's so fulfilling.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that is, you need to be
Yeah.
the voice inside everybody's head. I didn't even think about
Uh,
the mental part of it because, like I said earlier, yeah, of course, I had the insecurities days or whatever, but I'm generally a pretty confident person in the way I look. My mother was not. So when I'd walk around in these bikinis with, a big upper body,
yes.
oh my goodness, Katelynn. But, with the mental part of it, that definitely strikes a chord with me because and you kind of hit the nail on the head because they were good. My brothers were overall academically like really smart while I struggled. But it was always in like the math component. My brain just does not work that way. And there was so much anxiety surrounding it growing up because I'd have to do math problems in front of everyone and I'd fail, and it was just this whole thing. So I always grew up being like, I'm dumb at math. I don't like it. Don't ask me what 2 plus 2 is. I know I'm not going to answer it though. It's just,
yes.
it created so much anxiety that now I'm just like, I'm not good at math. But on the flip side, in terms of academia, I, all my brothers and I are really close in age. So, but regardless, I always like excelled so much further in like reading and writing in English than they did. And that
Wow.
always made me feel so good. But there was
There
this
you go.
one thing. I was like, I could do this, but they
Yeah.
couldn't.
There you go. And here's the cool thing too is even in math examples, like a great example, right? Like even our perceptions that we're not good at math, we don't realize is we're actually like doing mathematical applications on a daily basis in our life, right? I remember I used to think I sucked at geometry. And it's actually so funny. Like me and my sister just going back and forth on girl math, which I don't know anyone who's heard girl math. We've known girl math for a while, but it was funny
I
because it's
love
like,
it.
yeah, it's hysterical. And you think about geometry and it's like, okay, if train A and train B are going from this point to this point and there's this time and like what time will it arrive, right? That makes my brain want to just implode and I just can't. Like I can't. And I just am so bad in geometry. But if you look at me and you're like, okay, if this store sells this for this amount and this store sells this for this amount and I can get a rebate here for this amount and it's going to go on sale here for this percentage here and I have X amount in my bank account and this much is coming in, what can I actually afford to buy?
You're a genius.
And I'm a genius now. But you sit down and you do it in a form that's not valuable to me and I can't figure it out. And it's funny because anyone who's listening to this, I know you guys have that mathematical equation in your head on something that's important to you. You're like, I do that with sports. I do that with fitness, right? And even fitness, like if I hold this and I lift this amount of weights with this amount of weights and I eat this much calories per day, that's math. So we're all doing math in our own form. And it's like when we think it should be that one form of getting the good grade in class, like we're missing out on the magnificence of where we actually have it and how we can apply it. One really cool thing, one of my clients just told me, and I was like, this is brilliant, right? I would have taken this geometry class back in the day had this been available. Yeah, totally. But there's an option now with her daughter, and her daughter's very artistic. And now there's an option for geometry where there's the regular geometry where you could do like that. And if you're great at math, you'd probably go for that one. And there's also a geometry that's applied for construction and architecture. And so for someone who really loves like design and fashion, and I do love architecture, if you actually taught me how to apply it, to that, I would be very interested, because now all of the things that I'm looking at, you're giving me a greater understanding of, a greater detail. And I was like, wow, that's brilliant. Basically, they have now geometry for creatives. So it's not that we're unable to learn,
Wow.
and it's not that we're lacking anything. It's just that you haven't applied it to a form that is inspiring to learn and to apply it to. It's just not aligned with your priorities. It's not aligned with your purpose. And if it was aligned to writing, if someone had shown you the mathematical equations of writing and how it could make you a better writer and understand literature to a greater degree with all your English classes, you would have been like, math is great. I love math.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no one ever showed you that. So you're like, no more math. Yeah.
Yeah, now traditional schools, like whatever, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's so funny. Yeah, this I never thought about the mental side of it. And I don't know where, sorry, we're talking about me, but
It's
I don't know
perfect.
where I got that from. Thanks. Where I
Yeah.
got that from, because I mean, I think it helps growing up with boys who are just very alpha, and they don't really care as much
Mhm.
as women do about the outside perception generally. Because my mom, she actually, I've told this before, God bless her, but she grew up in the 60s and 70s, and the ideal physique back then was model, stick, thin, don't eat, right?
Yes.
And I have her body type. I have a sweater on, but I'm pretty naturally muscular and short.
Okay.
And she's told me this 100,000 times. She always wanted to have, like, her mother was very tall, had that exact physique. And she wanted that tall, like ballerinas, arms and all this. And she always hated her arms. And I'm like, Mom, your arms are fine. Like, you're beautiful. Like, I can't understand why you don't see these things. And she had gotten remarried when I was in my early 20s. And when she was shopping for, it's so cute. I love telling this story. But when she was shopping for wedding dresses, my sister-in-laws, my brother's wives, were out with her because they live in Nebraska and I'm in Tennessee. They're like, Sally, try on this dress. It'll look great on you. It'll look good on you. She's like, no, my arms will look terrible in it. But she's a people pleaser, so she did it. And she walked out and they're like, oh, we know what you mean, Sally. Like, yeah. And like, she called me crying, and I was like, Mom. And we ended up laughing at the end of this conversation because I was like, Mom, I love you so much. You're so beautiful, but you're never going to have those arms. Just give it up.
Absolutely.
And she just died laughing because she kind of got out of her own head for a little bit, and it was just like, oh, I'm in my 50s. It's not going to happen anytime soon.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because this is the perfection. It's like when we say, where does it come from, right? Your mom's came from her mom. She admired your mom, and she thought that her mom's form of the ballerina body was better. And so she spent most of her life thinking that that's what she should look like. And the second that you had an opportunity, like that 1 second that she disconnected from it, she just got to laugh and be like, what am I doing? I don't have that body. I'm not going to have that body. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, loving and appreciating what we have and realizing how it's perfect for us is really important. And same with you with the mental dysmorphia that comes in. It's like you grew up with these individuals that were getting straight A's in class. And fair enough, society also says like it's really important to get straight A's in class. And so you have all this feedback from the world, from your family, of your observations that this is what means you're smart. And so now all of a sudden you're like, well, if I don't have this, I'm not smart. And it's like, according to who? Funny enough, some of the people who I connect with who have like horrible grades, right? They've had horrible grades in school and they haven't done well. They're not unintelligent. And on the back end,
Mm.
they were still studying, but they were just studying things that were inspiring to them. So on the back end, they're really engaged in subjects that are important to them, really engaged. And then there's subjects at school that they can't engage with just because they're not inspired. They don't see how it's going to fulfill their purpose. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not unintelligent. And so, yeah, it's crazy when we think about it. And if anyone's listening and they have kids, it's like, pay attention to what's actually going on with your kids. If they're
That's a
highly
big one.
engaged, Yeah, if they're highly engaged in certain subjects, you know those subjects are meaningful to them. They have a deeper meaning and a deeper purpose. If there's subjects that they're really hard to engage in, that's because they can't see how those subjects are going to help them or going to serve them. It's actually funny enough why I stopped taking math, like at a certain point, because I had no idea why it would serve
So did
me
I.
and no clue. And then it wasn't until like I mean I study a lot outside, and there's one individual I remember sitting, we were in like an advanced kind of physics class, which is weird that I'm taking an advanced physics class like outside of school, about like universal laws and how they apply to human behavior and stuff, and it's physics, and there were some mathematical components that I was having a hard time understanding. But funny enough, I was sitting next to Math Whiz. He loved math is his life purpose, and he looks at me and he goes, if you just understand basic calculus, you can understand the entire language of math. And I looked at him and I go,
Ugh.
huh. But I was like, wait a minute. So all of this is easy as long as you understand, like, that's it, just basic calculus. I was like 2 classes away from algebra. Like, that was it. And you think about it, and he's like, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, that's like not that big of a deal. Had someone told me that back in the day, that you can understand and have a basic understanding and a comprehension of most math on this planet and most things. And like there's the book Principia, which is like mathematics, and I really do want to read it. It's supposed to be amazing, but a little nervous about understanding the
Ugh.
calculus
Yeah.
component. But it's about like one of my friends, he's like, it brought me to tears. And I was like, amazing. Like a math book, right? It's like that kind of
Really?
universal laws and principles math book. And I was like, had someone said, like, you can read this book that's going to change your life and help you to understand the world in like a crazy way, and all you do is like understand calculus, I'd be like, sure, I'll stay in class. I'll figure it out. So if you're listening to this, it's like, what are you actually having a hard time engaging in? And what do you love, and what do you love to engage in? Because if you can link those things that you have a hard time engaging in into things that you love engaging with, then all of a sudden that's a deeper why for you to do it. If we're not doing things, if we're not focused on things, it's not because there's anything wrong with you. You're not stupid. You don't have anything missing inside you. It just doesn't have that big enough why. And if you can see how whatever that is going to serve the thing that is the bigger why, you'll jump in and you'll do it without me having to remind you. You won't need motivation. You'll just wake up daily and get things done. It's quite, we're
You
quite
know, yeah.
amazing as humans.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can do a
Yeah, we
lot.
don't give ourselves enough credit, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to circle back around
Uh,
to the mom component because not only with how, you know, paying attention to your children, but in the body dysmorphia sense, passing that on. Is that a thing? Which I'm pretty sure the
yeah.
answer is yes. So we do have a lot of mom listeners. And speaking of what you just said was finding a big enough why, a lot of times the reason why moms overhaul their lives is because of their children, right?
Yes.
So how would you speak to like moms who are like, I know I struggle with this, but I don't want my daughter to. Granted, you can't control everybody else but yourself. How would you speak to those kinds of moms?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be unavoidable. You're not going to be able to avoid it, because no matter what, your kids are going to put you on a pedestal, infatuate, think you're better in whatever way, shape, or form. Like the minute that we're born, we're like, mom is like the most amazing thing on the face of the planet. Dad is as well, but we're like, mom's the life force, mom's feeding us, mom's this, mom's that, right? So mom usually is our first infatuation, our first heavy one. So if you think that you can avoid it, you're not going to. It is really helpful if you work on it on your own. We gave some great tips in here and tricks on like how to actually transform your own, because then if your kids face it, well, when your kids face it, what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to explain it to them to a greater degree. Like you can actually help to shift their perceptions, but it is also unrealistic to think that you're going to be able to control yourself to such a great degree that you can avoid having your kids go through this. Even if you were the most perfect mom in your perception and never, ever, ever, ever said anything, guess what's going to happen? They go to school. They watch
Yeah.
movies. Yeah, they see TV. They go to a grocery store. You can go to a grocery store. You just take them out of their physical environment. You just go in the front yard and someone walks by and they could have a misperception about themselves. They could look and just say, that person's better looking than me. They have this and I don't. So to think that you can avoid it is unrealistic. I do suggest like you work on it on your own. And not only does that help you to go through the challenges and be able to explain it to them better, but also it takes away like this overwhelming pain that we have. Like when our kids are suffering, it takes away our suffering with them. Because what happens is when we wind up suffering with them because we haven't resolved the same pain within ourselves, we only suffer with our kids. We want to prevent them from experiencing pain when we have that pain inside ourselves and we haven't resolved it. But when you resolve it, then you're more objective when the kid actually has the pain. You're not trying to save them or rescue them or baby them or treat them like a victim or like, oh my God, it's so sad, right? You have empathy. You understand what they're going through, which is a really heartfelt place to connect from. And you're very objective in how you can help them get over it. You get rid of all your emotions and you're acting instead of reacting. Yeah. So with parents, it's like work on you. Totally work on you. Even if your kid's like the hardest kid on the face of the planet. Because I know sometimes, I mean, we're all teenagers. We've all been those kids at one point in our life, whether it be for a short period of time or a long period of time. We're like, yeah, that made my mom and dad a little crazy. I think I caused them some major stress. Even like if you have kids like that on a more extreme level, you still work on it within yourself. You work on those components within yourself, and then you can objectively show up to a greater degree. And sometimes, depending on the level of extremities and extremeness, sometimes it's wisdom to walk away, which is one of the hardest lessons sometimes parents have. Because I know some people are listening to this and be like, but Carly, you don't understand what's happening. And I do. I've worked with individuals where it's like you've actually had to walk away and make a decision, you know, even when your kid is young, and put them somewhere else because of whatever circumstance. It's actually that challenging. But having the empathy and the understanding and objectivity and not trying to save the day. Because remember too, when you're a kid, even if you remember when you're a kid, to the degree that we're having a hard time as kids, I want you to remember how manipulative you are. And you are the best salesperson on the planet to your parents, and how great we were at getting what we wanted and using our own challenges and pain as well. So to the degree that, you know, kids have a hard time, we're also getting what we want out of, you know, having all these struggles and stuff. So just remember that we're not little angels as kids. Remember
That's
you,
really
love
cute.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And I think with moms that your degree of influence is a lot stronger than you would think. Like it's obvious, right? You're influencing your children, you're raising them, right? But it goes so much deeper than that, right? And if you, like you just said, if you're just working on yourself, like that will spill over. And then yeah, when you do see your child suffering, or maybe not even suffering, but knowing how to properly reinforce their um, beautiful attributes about who they are, so that yeah, you can hope and pray that when the outside forces start attacking them, they know how to deflect and to be like, that's not true though.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny, I was listening to like an interview with Heidi Klum fairly recently, and something that she said about her parents was really interesting, because she was talking about her physicality and someone was like, what's it like to be the body? Right. And she's like, well, I don't really think of myself that way. She goes, it's kind of, I think she was saying something like, it's kind of funny to think of myself that way. And she goes, because to me, I'm just a normal person and, you know, this is how I look. And she said, but she said her parents had described it, if I remember correctly, in a way where it's like, this is just a job. And so when she had to lose weight, right, for certain gigs or whatever, and she has to be thinner, it wasn't like I'm ugly or fat. She was just like, this is the job and this is what the job asks for. So I'll just get the job done. Right. When we take it off and someone says, like, and this happens with models a lot, right? Or individuals, and then someone looks at you and says, oh, you need to lose weight. If you take it as that perception, I need to lose weight because I'm fat or I'm ugly, right? Then all of a sudden that's the internal body dysmorphia comes in. But sometimes it literally is just that job, or it's just a health issue. Sometimes it's a health issue. I remember when I was younger, I was very, very heavy. And my mom did say to me, she's like, it's time for you to lose weight. She said, and not because she's like, she didn't say it because I was fat. She was like, I was ugly, but I had gained a lot of weight. And she's like, it's just not healthy. And that was the first time in my brain that it had clicked. If I get too obese, it isn't healthy. And then I started to learn about the health impacts of getting obese, right? Because I was obese at a certain point as a kid. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. So now which is fascinating that the body dysmorphia is gone and stuff. I fluctuate for sure, depending on what I'm doing and my workload and all that different stuff and how much time I have to cook. So many different things. So if I am
Yeah.
heavier and I notice it's getting like, maybe it's getting like a little work, I'll be like, oh, it's time to trim down a little bit for my health. Right. And so now it's just that job. So it's like when you think about it and you're communicating with your kids, it's like, think about how you want to communicate with them in a sense that it is wisdom, because it is wisdom not to body shame people. Like it's wisdom to not have to like body shame them at the same time, because then they take on that shame. But then at the same time, it's also wisdom to make sure that they're focused on their health. Right. And how do you transform like how you're describing it to someone in a way that's inspiring, inspiring for them and inspiring for you, because it makes you shift your perceptions too. It's a great thing about being a parent. Yeah, you really want to help your
Yeah.
kid, and it's going to force you to own your stuff, face your stuff, love yourself, so that you can help your kids as well. It's really helpful.
Yeah, and I know I've talked a lot about my mom. She's an absolute angel, but it's just so funny how like I feel like my dad's side of the family and that those personalities were the bigger impact on who I am today, because uh there were moments where I've never ever remembered them, only because my mom in my adult life brought them up to me to apologize like 20, 30 years later about this comment she made. And some of the comment, and there's one that I actually captured, two I captured on camera, because I used to love the little video camera. I always had it out. And it was so much that it was like beyond annoying to my family, because I was always had that video camera out. So everyone was so annoyed at me at this one time. And my mom was like, if you don't turn that off, I'm going to tell everyone how much you weigh. And I'm like, ooh, okay. Like, what? And she looked at me and she's like, Katelynn, I'm so sorry. My mom is an extremely empathetic, sensitive person.
Yes.
I'm just so sorry if that ever impacted you. And I was like, Mom, I would not have remembered it if I didn't catch it on camera.
That's amazing. And this is our perceptual judgments as well. So here your moms has
Yeah.
spent decades, by the way, decades beating herself up for her perception of something that she's done wrong. And it's funny, that's mom dysmorphia, where in reality, it didn't even, you don't
Oh,
remember it. It's mom dysmorphia. You don't remember it. It didn't impact you. And so going back and clearing our guilt and shame, it's like instead of waiting decades to clear it, right? It's like now it's like, and I do this with one-on-one clients and workshops. It's like, let's just get it done. Let's get it done. Let's clear that guilt. Let's clear that shame. Let's also make sure you're not too proud. So you don't have like the pride before the fall. Let's balance yourself, your emotions. Let's not take the decades of experiences and pain and suffering to like go through this. It just doesn't have to take that long anymore. It genuinely doesn't.
yeah.
Yeah, it genuinely doesn't. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, gosh, mom just more. There's how many are there? We keep
Yes,
going down
there's
these rabbit holes that I just want to
yeah.
dive into, but
Basically, it's like anything that we have a misperception on a view of, we have a dysmorphic view because we're twisting it and we're turning it into our own perceptions instead of seeing what it actually is. Right. So you can have it on clothes, you have it on hair. I could have it on the way my house is set up. I could have it on how I am as a wife, a mom, a friend, right? All these different components, how I am mentally, even spiritually, right? Financially, comparing myself financially to other people, comparing my business to other people and how it is and how I run it and how I show up in it. There's so many different comparisons that we can have. And that all creates a dysmorphic view if we're putting ourselves down, putting someone else up, but also if we're putting other people down and putting ourselves up, right? Which is not the person. This is where the pride before the fall. Like no one wants to hang out with the person who sits there and just like, you suck at this, you suck at this, and I'm great at this. No one wants to hang out with that person. So balancing out our
no.
own prides before someone else balances out for you.
I love being
Yeah.
that person.
Yeah. Yeah. Which we all get
That's
to be
so
that
funny.
person every now and then. And you're like, yeah, it's on.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
hilarious. Do you know who Dr. John Deloney?
I don't think I've heard of him. No.
Oh. You would love his podcast because
Okay.
Dave Ramsey?
Yes.
Okay, he is a part of the Dave Ramsey network. Like he's on
Okay.
the Dave Ramsey show every so often, but he does have his own little podcast where he has like two PhDs, super super smart guy, but it's kind of the same thing with the Dave Ramsey show where he'll have live callers call in with like their life problems. I've cheated on my wife, or how do I talk to my kid about this thing, or anything. And his past was, he would literally talk people off a bridge, like that kind of job. And a
Yeah,
lot of the time a lot of the things that he says, or he asks people to constantly ask themselves is this a story? Is this true? Or is this a story you're telling yourself? And it's a lot, basically exactly what you're saying. Like, this is not true. It's just what I'm telling myself based off of all these factors, right? You should listen
absolutely.
to it.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, so any final thoughts before we close up shop?
Yeah, there's nothing out there on this planet that's more magnificent than who you are the way you are. And whenever you compare yourself to one or many forms on the outside, you form those dysmorphic perceptions of yourself, and it causes that brain noise to really genuinely disconnect you from who you are and the magnificence of your own life. So remembering that and actually ensuring that you're dedicating yourself to knowing and having that certainty that your life are magnificent exactly as you are today. Nothing has to change. Yeah, nothing has to change inside you. You're perfect the way you are.
Oh, thanks. Well, no, that's so beautiful. It's so true. And everyone needs to tell themselves that on the daily. But how can
Yeah.
people connect with you?
Yes, so definitely my website, so carlypepin.com. And then, of course, there's all the social media platforms, whatever you prefer is on there. And then you can also just contact me directly on the website as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I had such a great time. I could probably go on so many other tangents, not only on this subject, but just your work in general. So hopefully to have you back again.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much, Caitlin.
Thank you. And everyone else, you have a great rest of the week. Until next week. Bye. Thanks for listening to the FFP Alignment Podcast. Please support us by downloading, rating, and recommending us to your friends and family. Be sure to check us out on Instagram at the FitFemme Project. That's FITFEMME Project. And for those of you looking to find their essential balance of lifestyle and fitness, book a free consult by going to thefitfemmeproject.com. That's FITFEMME Project.com and click Apply Now. Until next time, this is the FitFemme Project Alignment Podcast.